Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are going to be covering the blockbuster news that just came out this morning, talking about the proposed acquisition of Bitfarms by Riot Platforms. Now, this is obviously the biggest M&A action we've seen post-halving, really since we've seen HUD-8 and USBTC combine last year. There's a lot to unpack with this one. We're going to be going through this in detail today. We were supposed to have Ben from Bitfarms on for a follow-up interview yesterday, but obviously in hindsight, we can see why he's now rebooked that till next Monday. So we're going to be talking to Ben about this as well. But Anthony Power and I wanted to get into it and do a deep dive into the metrics, analysis, and whether or not we think this deal will eventually go through. Now, with that being said, take a second, you guys, hit the like button. It's a huge help to us. It pushes this video out to other people like you who may find value. If you're not subscribed to the channel, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And with that being said, let's get into guys. So that's right. Today's video, Anthony Power and I are going to be dissecting hot off the press news this morning. Riot Platforms, our good friend Jason Less, has come out and offered to purchase Bitfarms for $2.30 US per share. This is causing a lot of different reactions on Twitter, on X, all over social media. So we wanted to get on here this morning, Anthony, get your opinion on this, talk about some of the metrics, the analysis of this combined or proposed combined company, and whether or not we think this is actually going to come to fruition, at least at this price point. So Anthony, how are you doing this morning?
Yeah, I'm doing good today, thanks.
Now, I got to ask, Anthony, I know we did a video a few weeks back talking about Marathon and the proposed purchase, or I guess at that point, the assumption that they may go out and purchase Bitfarms. I had to bring it up, buddy. You had shot this one down. You said this would never happen because of the premium that companies have to pay on these publicly traded firms. So we're going to get into that as we talk about the analysis. Anthony and I both think this $2.30 price point may not eventually push through. However, Anthony, I wanted to bring up the Marathon comments and get your opinion on why you think this may be a better fit for Riot, and maybe why we saw Riot come out of the gate first in terms of M&A in this sector.
Yeah, I mean, it came as a surprise. I'll be honest. The issue that miners have going forward is finding the facilities. We've talked on the last few podcasts now about there's not going to be any more Corsicanas to buy out there. These big sites are not going to be available going forward. So with that, taking that into account, you've got to look at what the miners can do to grow hash rate, because it looks like it's never ending, grow hash rate constantly, keep above their percentage above the global hash rate as everything increases. And in this instance, looking for an acquisition, albeit you're having to pay a premium, but the premium they offered there probably won't get the shareholder approval. I mean, they're offering $2.30. The share price this morning had already reached $2.25 at open. It's pulled back a little bit, but it's an interesting one, because we know what the other miners have been paying for their infrastructure and their mining machines, and we've used the recent purchases from CleanSpark to highlight this. So CleanSpark have bought a number of sites because they're also trying to get their hash rate to 32 by the end of the year. And they didn't have enough sites to grow themselves, so they've got to go out there and either build sites or purchase ready-made sites. And they've been purchasing a few ready-made data centers and paying around about $8-9 million per exahash. So even if you said, let's call it 10 million, let's put a little bit of a premium, call it $10 million. We know what the mining companies are paying for the latest, most efficient machines, because all these big miners that are growing this year have been buying these, big orders of S21, T21, M60s from Micro BT, and are paying approximately $14 to $16 a terahash. So let's use a higher figure of $16 a terahash. You want to buy 1 exahash of machines, that's going to cost you, 16 million. Add that to the 10 million, and you've got 26 million for your infrastructure and your machine order. Multiply that by 21, you get 546. Now, there are other costs involved. It depends if the power setup needs to be sorted out or other costs that will come up. So let's throw in another 100 million, another sort of 20% on top of that to make sure everything, goes smoothly. And you're up to sort of 650 million then. What Riot Platforms offer this morning for this deal is, approximately about 900 million in terms of, what they're putting on the table at the moment. So that's sort of a premium of about 35% on what it would cost to go out and do that. Now, to go out, even if you had like $1 billion to go and build a mining company with the sites, with co-located to cheap power, there are lots of variables that you've also got to factor in. So, it's not just a case of finding infrastructure. It's not just a case of having machine orders that you can get delivered when you want them. And that seems to be no longer as big a bottleneck as it used to be back in 2021 when there was like 8, 9, 10-month lead time on some of these machines. But having the power at sort of, cheap, anywhere as an average of 4 cents, you want to be at that sort of level, that could be the challenge. And maybe, Jason and the team at Riot Platforms have been thinking, you know what, there are a couple of miners out there that could probably give us, access to that. And we know that with what Bitfarms are doing this year, they're growing massively in Paraguay, they're growing in Argentina, they're growing in the US, and they're growing from where they are at the moment at 7 exahash all the way up to 21 exahash by the end of the year. So they've got their growth in play, albeit it's a challenging growth target to meet. We discussed that on a previous podcast as well, but they have got everything in play in terms of sites, machines. Pretty much most of it's been paid for, so they'll have to maybe utilize the ATM to cover some of the amounts when the final sets of machines come through, in terms of payments for those. But everything was sort of is on track, and we were expecting end of May, end of June to see that 7 exahash grow to 12 exahash by the end of June, because that's their plan. And then a further 9 exahash, doesn't stop at the end of June, further 9 exahash for the rest of the year. So that was our feeling. But, if you sit back and look at some of the variables that people haven't got control over, maybe those sort of decisions in the boardroom at Riot were one that determined they ought to start thinking about an acquisition. And you're buying Bitfarms.
Hold on. Let me jump in at that boardroom comment.
Yeah.
Now, Anthony, that's a perfect segue. Speaking of boardroom, I want to get into some of these pro forma combined company metrics and operational targets and things like that as well. But I want to talk about the boardroom for a second as well, because when you buy a company, not only do you get all the parts of the company, but you also get the people. And another big news story we've been following, and one that we were excited to talk to Ben about actually yesterday, Ben has now rebooked that interview till Monday, so June 3rd, was actually the CEO hunt as well. So that's another factor here. When you combine companies like this, obviously you don't need 2 CEOs, 2 CFOs. Those are redundant, right? But in this situation, you have one of the most intelligent mining officers in the world with Ben Ganong, and you don't have a CEO in that position. So it kind of already avoids some redundancy there. What do you think about the management mix, the leadership team, and the reaction of Bitfarms board to this proposal?
So the board have rejected the proposal, but that's not unusual for that to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, they're offering 15% as a premium. We've talked before about some of these tech companies, who get acquired, and generally, 30, 40, 50% is sort of like, the premium that they'd be looking for. I think shareholders will be disappointed at $2.30 when you think the share price of Bitfarms this year was getting close to $4 a share. So that would be disappointing for them. But at the end of the day, the price of the shares is what the price is today, not what it was whenever. And it's how you value the company. Now, I look at these valuations, and I've raised, many times when you look at the valuation of, say, the likes of Marathon Digital, the likes of CleanSpark, the likes of Riot Platforms, the likes of Cypher, and then compare those valuations by exahash to some of the other miners, and you see a big disparity. So, even looking at today, and Bitfarms have got, seven exahash. They've got a market capitalization that's about just under 730 million. If you look at their value per, let's bring down to the lowest level. So the value per terahash today, and also take into account they've got HODL. So let's remove the HODL from the market capitalization, come up with more of an enterprise value, and then look at the enterprise value by hash rate. So for Bitfarms today, their value per terahash at the lowest level is $85. Now, if you look at CleanSpark, the value of their terahash is about $199. If you look at Marathon, it's about $166. You look at Riot, it's $146. You look at Cypher, it's $134. So there's a big premium on those four companies, and maybe that's a factor that Riot looked at. In fact, they're going to, get a company that's going to add, if they reach their target by the end of the year, it's going to add another 60% of hash rate to the target and get them to sort of, at least 50 exahash by the end of the year, making them the largest Bitcoin miner in the world. And they're buying it for, a fraction of what their own value is and what some of these other mining companies are. But then again, you can look at other mining companies that aren't in this conversation. So even if we looked at the likes of Hut 8, their hash rate, and bear in mind, when I talk about other companies' hash rate, I'm just talking about the self-mining hash rate, but looking at the company as a whole. So even if you take the self-mining hash rate of Hut at the moment, their valuation is about $54 a terahash. You look at Hive Digital. Hive Digital have got 5 exahash. The company's valued at the moment in terms of market capitalization, 240 million. So, a fraction of even what Bitfarms is, a third of the total there. Their value from their hash rate, and bear in mind, they've got a HPC business that is delivering between $10 and $20 million a year. Their hash rate's at $20 a terahash. So, is this announcement today potentially the start of what some of the companies were discussing, a while back, and saying, the bigger companies were saying there's going to be a lot of merger and acquisitions this year, and is it become an open season for some of these? Because even if you say looked at the likes of Hive and said, well, we're going to pay 50% premium, you'd be paying $30 a terahash. Well, we've just articulated that Marathon at the moment 6 times more expensive than that. So, that's 5 exahash. I mean, obviously, it's a smaller amount than Bitfarms, and they have got a growth target to get to 8 exahash, and they'll be achieving 5.5, maybe by the end of June. So they're well on track to get to their 8 exahash there, but the valuation is really low. It's an interesting one from Jason. On the grounds he's looked at what he's getting with Bitfarms, and you then sort of wonder, was there other miners that they were also considering? What about IREN? Were they a similar? If you think about miners that will grow to that level by the end of the year, IREN are going to grow to 30 exahash. Yes, they've got more of a premium to their value now, because they're at 10 exahash and they've got a market capitalization of over a billion. I think close to 1.2 billion. So they're fast looking like they're going to overtake Cypher in terms of market capitalization. They haven't got a HODL, but they haven't got any debt either on the balance sheet. So that's quite a clean company in terms of what you value. Plus, they've got a significant amount of cash at the last time they reported that. So I think that was in the region of about 300 million. So you could argue, for 10 exahash there, you're getting something around about the 900 million. And so their hash rate is valued at about 90. So Bitfarms at 85, IREN at 90, 2 similar companies. You know, do we see another company now coming and look at acquiring other? You know, is this going to be the start of something, or is this something it's a one-off and it'll be down to the shareholders, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Yeah, I've got so many questions for you, Anthony. I want to come back to those multi-party players in the M&A space, but just to wrap up the boardroom conversation there, I know we both follow Mike Alfred. He put out a tweet this morning quoting Jason Les saying, "We're deeply concerned that the founders on the Bitfarms board, specifically Nicholas Bonta, who's now the interim CEO, and Emiliano Grodzki, may not be acting in the best interest of all Bitfarms shareholders." So the CEO of Riot Platforms has came out and said he may have concerns about the boardroom. Mike Alfred has picked up on this, basically saying this confirms his fears about that boardroom situation at Bitfarms, and talking about the lawsuit between Jeff Morphy, who was the former CEO at Bitfarms, and this board of directors. So there's a lot of internal turmoil going on or drama within the boardroom here. Maybe an opportunity for Jason to take advantage of some of the confusion. For those of you who don't know, Jason Les used to be a professional poker player, very strategic, very good at reading people, and very good at finding opportune positions to take advantage of situations. You could say he's almost going all in on Bitfarms, but I think we will see, obviously you don't show all your cards right out of the gate, right? People come into a negotiation at a starting point with the intention probably to meet somewhere in the middle, but very interesting dynamics there. Now, Anthony, my next question for you, you talk about this as a catalyst for potentially more M&A in this space. Do you think this may also act as a catalyst to companies like Marathon or maybe some of the other players that could have potentially been looking at Bitfarms and start almost a bidding war? Jason Les and the team at Riot basically came out alongside this announcement saying they now have a 9.25% stake in Bitfarms. So that's obviously a huge benefit to Riot as well. They're a 10th owner of Bitfarms. Do you think we're going to see multi-offers, multiple bids, and the kickoff of M&A because of this, Anthony?
There's not many companies that can have the resources to do this. Marathon would be certainly one of them. Maybe CleanSpark as well, with the size of the market capitalization, they'd have to raise more money to buy more shares. But Marathon have got a really strong treasury, so potentially there could be. It will certainly make them take notice anyway of what Riot are trying to do. And bear in mind, this is day one, so you know, it's not going to happen overnight. There's going to have to be, you know, shareholder approval. The board have rejected it, but the shareholders also get to have a say. And I know that Bitfarms have got a special AGM at the end of this week, I think, to probably talk through how they feel and maybe give their indication to shareholders what they should be looking at. I got to see Jeff in London a few weeks ago at the AIM Summit and had a chat with him, and you know, this was before the lawsuit was announced. So I know from his perspective, you know, obviously it wasn't his decision to leave Bitfarms, and there was always speculation as to why. And you know, I'm not here to say why his position was terminated. Obviously, the lawsuit terminated it in full, but he'd already sort of effectively been put on to borrowed time before that, and so you know, he was obviously reacting. And whether these two things are connected now in the fact that, you know, this news has come out, and it sounds like conversations were had previously. So whether there were conversations in April and we are today where we are today, it sounds like Riot have been building a sizable position. So they would have bought, like you say, 9.25% of the company. That's nearly $70 million of shares in the company as it sits at the moment. And I think, you know, other companies would have to, you know, if they're interested, would probably have to sort of like, you know, start looking at, you know, obviously a premium to what Riot have offered there for shareholders. But you know, we've seen this in other industries where there is a bidding war. And you know, again, you look at the miners who are sort of potential for moving into sort of, being acquired. And I suppose having that size of hash rate growth this year puts them in a position. I mean, I honestly didn't see it happening on the grounds that it didn't seem to be right for the numbers. But the one factor I don't have sight of is how easy is it to get the energy price that you want at the locations where sites might become available. So there are a lot of moving parts. I'm an accountant that looks at numbers. So, I can tell you what machines cost. I can tell you what people have paid for sites. I don't know what the additional cost would be to get the power at the right level in there. And you have to have the power at the right level. It's no use buying a site, buying machines, then paying 5-6 cents a kilowatt hour, because you'd just not be able to make money by switching them on. So you have to get the power at the right level. And the only way you get power at the right level is paying the cheapest price. And even at sort of 4 to 5 cents, that's not going to be great going forward. They need to get even lower than those figures there. And, we know a few of the miners are paying less than 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So we know Cypher are. We know that Soluna Holdings are paying less than 3 cents. We had, John on the podcast recently. He was able to say that, they can pick up the stranded energy there, and it's a win-win. So they're paying for energy that hasn't got another use for it. So they're able to get cheap power for their projects, and they like it. Their partner companies like it. The energy company likes it as well, because they're getting something that they didn't think they'd be able to sell, and it works for all those. But you've got to have that cheap energy available, and it looks like having it, if you want to grow 21 exahash, you've got to have a significant, is that going to be 20 sites? I mean, people are saying at the moment 50 megawatts or 100 megawatts. Well, 100 megawatts is probably about maybe 3 to 4 exahash in terms of mining machines there. So you'd need a lot of sites to get to 21 exahash, and perhaps all the unknowns, put a cost on what the unknowns are in terms of time, effort, ability, and that's where you build in what's a premium worth paying for. So I suppose that's where it is from Jason. And actually, if you're going to get Ben Gagnon thrown into the mix as your new chief mining officer for Riot, then you're going to get probably the most respected mining officer in the space.
Not a bad perk out of the deal to get Ben thrown in there, right? And you're totally right, Anthony. I didn't see this coming either. And to your defense, it hasn't gone through yet, and it wasn't Marathon. So you're not technically out of turn. But you're right, Anthony. I could buy all the pieces of a car too, probably for less than a new car. But that doesn't mean I know how to build a car just as good as the Toyota or Ford or whatever, right? So there is a premium, and that's why these companies have to pay that premium. Now, I want to take it kind of a level further, Anthony. So the next part of the conversation here, I want to talk about, if this were to go through, what are some of the key benefits here, and whether or not you agree with Riot's statement. So first and foremost, they said they're going to create the largest premier Bitcoin mining company globally. 52 exahash is what they quoted in the PR, which lines up exactly with what you said by combining the two parts. The second pillar, they talk about geographic diversification. You just mentioned about the Paraguay. This is becoming extremely relevant as we're starting to see Bitcoin really take center stage in a lot of the political discussion around the world. So having that geographic diversity does give you some level of protection or comfort. And then they talk about the strong financial position of Riot as kind of their top 3 reasons why this should make sense. Really driving that future growth. So I wanted to see, Anthony, from your perspective, do you think they're all valid? And which of these 3 do you think really are the main driving feature for this M&A proposal this morning?
I think they're all valid. They're all valid reasons for looking at a company like Bitfarms. If you believe that going forward, the challenge will be getting infrastructure to get your growth. Now, bear in mind, Corsicana is a 1 gigawatt site, so that they've got lots of opportunity to grow that site out there. But maybe they're thinking they can do this in a 2-pronged way. They can grow hash rate. We talked about the market are keen to reward. At the moment, the way they're valuing these companies based on hash rate, and a premium's been given to CleanSpark. We've highlighted that in the conversation already. Premium's been given to Marathon Digital. These two companies are growing to 32 and 50 exahash this year, respectively. So, Riot's share price has also had some benefits since they announced what they were doing as well. So, yes, they've got Corsican, that will continue to grow, and I don't see any change in what they're doing there. But this move for Bitfarms, because they have a very, very strong treasury balance and they have a sizable hodl where they could meet this requirement quite easily, it gives them another pronged look at getting their hash rate to significant numbers. So if there's any concerns at Corsicana of achieving 32 this year, they're going to achieve it via an acquisition of automatically getting 7 exahash. But if Bitfarms are on target to get to 12, let's just use the 12. They get an extra 12 exahash by, even if it takes 3-4, I mean, who knows how long it's going to take to go through regulatory approval, because we looked at US BTC and that took over 12 months to go through approval. And that was a merger of equals. This is about purchasing another miner. So, but the rationale of getting that hash rate really quickly as part of the company, it should see them to get through to their sort of second stage growth targets in quicker time than expected. So, and they're hoping from that perspective that they get rewarded by being given a premium on their share price. So by acquiring Bitfarms at a significantly lower hash rate value than their value is at the moment, than the likes of CleanSpark, likes of Marathon, likes of Cypher, they're going to be in a really, really good position from a market perspective. And there'll be some synergies as well saved. So they'll save on something like some of the management costs, because they won't need to have 2 boards of directors and some of the senior management staff. Yes, they'll still need people to manage all these various sites, because Bitfarms, unlike Riot Platforms, who operate out of 2 sites, the Rockdale facility and the Corsicana facility, Bitfarms have about 11 sites, and have 11 sites in 4 different countries. So in Canada, in the US, in Argentina, and also in Paraguay.
In the PR, it specifically calls that out in the second bullet point, that geographic diversification. This would give them 15 different facilities in 4 countries. Yeah. So in terms of the combined exahash, that seems to check out. What are your thoughts on the geographic diversification? Because we've talked on one hand about, hey, it's a lot easier to manage growth and monitor and keep your logistics and everything in one site as opposed to multiple. We've also talked about the benefits of the geographic diversification in terms of the political, of the regulatory risks, some of that type of stuff. Do you think geographic diversification is the way to go, or do you think it's kind of just a necessity now because there aren't enough sites in a single country?
It's a bit of both. So they're also de-risking their the sites that are just held within the US, because even if you look at just the United States, there are political issues that if the current incumbent goes through for another term, certain people of that party have made it clear they don't want Bitcoin to succeed. And so, one thing about mining companies, when there is political upheaval and challenges in place, they'll move to other locations. So maybe by having some of their hash rates spread across other areas, it gives them an opportunity then to look at maybe some relocation. So even if there was political issues in Argentina and Paraguay, where do you think those mining machines are going to go to? They're going to go into Corsicana, because they're building a 1 gigawatt site. They've got a 700 megawatt facility at Rockdale, which is nowhere near utilized. They've just effectively removed all their hosting customers there. And although Jason said on the last podcast, they're not looking to expand significantly the hash rate there for the space, if push comes to shove and machines need to move from other locations, they have a facility there that's ready to accept machines. And Bitfarms, although they've got their 7 exahash at the moment, has an average efficiency of around about 31 exahash. So it's not got the most efficient fleet as it is at the moment. The 14 exahash that's coming in is some of the most efficient miners. So that's of interest to Riot. Obviously, the current amount of miners that they've got there. Some of those would have to be replaced because they're obviously getting old, and less efficient miners are not going to be great in delivering profits like some of these latest, the T21, the S21, the M60. So Riot will be able to move them in and move them out, and they may be able to sort of keep those machines in the same way that Core Scientific have them as necessary to increase hash rate, when the hash price increases and makes it more appealing to do that. And bear in mind, Corsicana and part of Rockdale, Corsicana, the whole stack's going to be immersion cooling. So maybe some of the machines can be adapted for immersion cooling and be able to run better in that technology, because you can underclock miners. You're not using as much power to mine because some of the parts are removed from a normal mine before it goes into immersion cooling. So you don't need things like fans or anything like that. So by removing those, you're actually reducing the energy to mine as well. So there are lots of factors in place there that we don't even know about. And if we get Ben on the program next week, he may be able to articulate, hypothetically, if anything did occur, what that would mean for a new owner of Bitfarms, or how his machines would be able to work in other areas if that was the case. But I think having that position across 4 countries there, I think it does give them a level of de-risk in terms of they haven't got all their eggs in one basket. At the moment, they've got all their eggs in Texas, right? Yeah. So that's my point, anyway.
And you're exactly right, Anthony. That's interesting by saying Riot, because of their facility scale, if they did have any issues with these sites, they've immediately got rack space to plug these rigs in Corsicana. Now, the other thing you talk about there, Anthony, we heard from Core Scientific, you're exactly right. They almost set up these auxiliary Bitcoin mines with the lower efficiency rigs. But in Texas, you guys, keep in mind, energy prices are variable and they're floating. So at times of the year, energy prices in Texas are virtually dirt cheap, right? So you can plug these machines in when energy prices are super low on that spectrum. And again, based on some of the dynamics you talked about, Anthony, you're still able to produce, I learned, a contribution or hopefully a profit for the company. Now, Anthony, in terms of next steps here, what can people expect? I see in the PR, it basically says, the entire board of Riot has unanimously approved this proposal. Bitfarms board, as you mentioned, has declined it out of the gate. But because Riot feels there may be some misalignment between the board of directors and the Bitfarms shareholders, they brought this information public and they actually want to push this to a vote. So what can people expect over the next few months here in terms of how this is going to play out?
I think Bitfarms putting together a special meeting this week, extraordinary special meeting to make sure shareholders are aware of what's going on. Riot will have to formally, once they reach a certain percentage, are required then to make it known what's happening, and they're making it known now that they want to purchase the whole company. And I'm assuming there'll be the shareholders will have some sort of say in the when it becomes ready for them to submit a formal document explaining exactly what's going to happen. So if I'm a shareholder of Bitfarms, I need to know not just a case of accepting the offer, but do I receive payment for my shares, or is it converted into the new company shares, Riot Platforms, for instance? So there's a lot of information still to be made available, but this is, like I say, we're literally a few hours after the announcement here, so I don't want to speculate too much, but It seems like Bitfarms are going to let their shareholders know their view and why they rejected it, and that's no surprise whatsoever. I mean, a 15% premium probably is very low what the expectations. The share price was about $4 earlier this year, and quite a few shareholders will probably still be who bought maybe in 2021, 2022, when the share price was significantly higher, are probably still trying to get back to that position. So this news for them isn't the greatest news, because they expected to see Bitfarms get to 21 exahash and then start getting the recognition they probably deserve, for being in that sort of, like, getting into that top tier. We talked about, what does a top tier miner look like? Well, 20 exahash and above is probably top tier by then in 2024. So they would fit into that bracket, along with IREN, along with the likes of CleanSpark, Riot, and then you've got the two members already in the 20 exahash. You've got the likes of course Scientific and Marathon Digital are already there in that top tier, but they haven't received that recognition at the moment, and I think that's probably why the board straight away. So this is not, we think we can do better than this. So and plus, obviously, from their perspective, they run the company. So
yeah, they sure do. I just looked on the chart, Anthony. Back March 20th, only Bitfarms was right around $2.50 US. So yeah, you're right. It does feel a little light for me. I'm a shareholder of Bitfarms. I don't think this is quite enough to push me over the line, but definitely of interest. So Anthony, I know we've covered a lot here. As you mentioned, this article only came out 2 hours ago, guys. So you're hearing it here first. Like I say, hot off the press. Is there anything else, Anthony, about this that maybe we're not considering or we haven't discussed yet?
As I say, I'm a little bit surprised. I'm hearing messages from other people in the industry that aren't as surprised. Maybe they saw it. There was so much talk in 2021 and 2022 about merger and acquisition, and it really didn't happen. So again, that was probably another reason why I felt it probably wasn't going to happen this time around. Maybe some of the smaller miners, and I don't put Bitfarms in the smaller miner bracket at the moment, having 7 exahash with getting to 12 in the next 6 weeks as their target doesn't put them in that sort of like that lower tier. But for some of the lower tier miners, we've articulated that they probably do need to look at acquisition, or certainly merger of equals, or however you want to call it, to grow and then be in a position where they can do something more than they can do individually at the moment. So the synergies of merging at that level are more apparent for smaller miners. But this one did catch me by surprise. But when you take a step back and start on and we've I've gone through the reasons why Riot probably looked at this and thought, actually, it's a good deal. If you've got all your sites lined up for this year, you've got your machine orders in there, all the work's been done for you effectively. You've just got to manage the process. So getting 21 exahash by the end of the year, and that shouldn't stop Riot still achieving their 31 exahash, because they've said this will put us at 52. 52 at the end of the year. At the moment, and I say that, it puts them, that would put them, as the biggest mining company in the world, public limited mining company in the world, because Marathon's target at the moment is 50. And they're operating at about 21, but they have got plugged in miners of about 29.9, so just under 30 exahash. They've still got to grow 20 exahash themselves. And yes, there was great news last week in Kenya. They've signed an agreement there, but that's an agreement like a joint venture again with the Kenyan government. And so they've got to announce some purchases of sites, purchase of machine orders to get to that 50 exahash position and show what that plan looks like. And bear in mind, for all the miners, you're effectively down to 7 months now. We're at the end of May this week, so you're into 7 months, and growth targets are not getting any easier to get to. So maybe this is one way: buy a company, get the 7 or 12 exahash banged in there straight away as part of your growth, because that should be I would expect Bitfarms next 2 months to say we're at 12 exahash. If they don't achieve that there, they've missed the first hurdle, where all these miners appear to be achieving their mid 2024 hurdles. So Hive did, IREN certainly did, TeraWulf look like they will. CleanSpark look like they're going to do it. Riot are on track now with Corsican to get to what they said they'd get to at so Bitfarms are the one that has got sort of like the biggest gap to fill in the next sort of 4.5 weeks. So May's update should be a potentially really good one. It should be a, 2 or 3 exahash on the sort of like on the April position to show that they're getting there and that, and we want to see the same amount of growth in the next 4 weeks to get to 12 at the end of the period. So yeah, that's my sort of like final say on it. Interesting, yeah.
I appreciate it, Anthony. It's great breakdown, and I'm surprised you can go into this level of detail just hours after the announcement. So it's great to listen to. We also have Ben, at least as of right now, on the program Monday, June 3rd. So we can get his opinion on this situation. We can also see May production results. Hopefully, they usually have it out on the 1st. And then we're in Corsicana with Jason and Riot in a couple of weeks. We can actually reach out and see if maybe he can jump on the channel before that as well to get their position. But this is a story we're going to continue to follow for you guys. If you have questions specifically about this, or maybe for Ben next week, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. Again, apologies that interview has been delayed, but obviously in hindsight, you guys can understand why. And if you're still watching the video at this point, hit the like button, you guys. It's free. It takes 1 second, and it helps get this content to other people who may have interest. If you're not subscribed to the channel, McNallie Money, we're almost at 44,000. That's all for today. Anthony, thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.